What's up, Bobby?
We're live. We're going to do it
We
live.
are live. Good to be here, man. How are you doing today?
Good. You too, I assume. We survived the hurricane. All is
Oh,
well.
yeah. I was just talking to my parents the other day. They're up in Orange County, and my dad was like, man, I don't know the last time that there was a tropical storm warning in Orange
Yeah.
County.
I'll tell you what, Amazon was delivering. I got packages. So.
Something special they got going on there, man. Well,
Prime shipping.
I'm amidst the 110-degree weather here in Austin, and your tropical storm warning out there in California. I'm stoked that we could both make it on here to chat today about crushing Q4 goals, man.
Let's do it.
I'm super stoked for everyone who is able to join. Welcome to How to Crush Your Q4 Goals. We're going to be talking strategies and tips for DTC brands for this upcoming holiday season. I'm Jonathon Blair, founder and fractional CFO at Grow CFO. We are a fractional CFO firm that specializes in outsourced finance services for growing D2C brands. And I've got my good friend here, Bobby Dietz, co-founder and partner at ATTN Agency. They're a full funnel performance marketing agency that's helping brands scale in the e-commerce world. And look, today we're just going to have a casual conversation. Couple of guys that are in the trenches of scaling D2C brands every single day and been doing it for years. We're just going to give you guys a bunch of free tips on how to crush your Q4 goals and make this holiday season the most successful that you've had to date. At the end, we're going to leave some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. But without further ado, we're going to dive right in. You ready, Bobby?
Let's do it.
So look, I know it's only August, 110 degrees in Austin. So what are we doing talking about Q4 planning? I'll tell you that from my perspective, my CFO clients planning for Q4 absolutely starts in the summer, depending on manufacturing lead times, usually around July, and then August, September, definitely like conversations really start like heating up. How far in advance do you and your clients start planning for Q4 holiday, Black Friday, Cyber Monday?
I mean, it's starting right now. Trying to figure out exactly what we want to do, timing. A lot of people talking about October season starting, but honestly, like trying to give actionable things on this call too. Like we do what's called we call it pre-testing. So like throughout the year, we're trying to figure out different kind of ads that we can run. If it's images or GIFs, those can kind of run year round for first time buyers and figure out what promo structure and language or colors work really well with Valentine's Day or Memorial Day or July 4th or something. Like the way we run promos then is kind of good pre-testing for what we're going to do Black Friday. And it gives us a leg up on how you go about structuring your deals, the way people react, and which ads perform the best. So we kind of have a really good sense of what we're going to do for Black Friday when, well before, it's actually time to go live. We're not guessing about what kind of structure for ads work the best because we've seen it all year and we've ran specific tests for this kind of stuff already.
Yeah. On my end, I would say in terms of like how soon it starts from the finance and kind of more ops side of things, usually the big trigger point that gets brands going like, oh, shoot, I need to start planning for Q4 is their manufacturing lead times, right? And when they have to commit to those big orders. What do you typically see on your end in terms of like when brands are starting to think about calculating that order that they have to place, which really leads into leaning on their marketing team to start talking about forecasting and how much they might sell? Like how do some of those conversations usually come about?
Several factors there. What percentage of their revenue is coming from Q4? If 75% of your revenue is coming from Q4, you got a heck of a lot of budget you're about to throw at these campaigns. What did you do last year? What are the sales goals this year? What are you pacing at? Looking at throughout the earlier part of the year when you've tried to scale or had promos, what kind of performance was there and how long did the sale go and were there peaks and valleys early or late? But in general, like if there's somebody's trying to make an inventory order, which is rather common, we look at their goals and how much they're trying to spend, and then we can reverse engineer like how many sales we think we're going to get. Okay, AOV is going to go down because you do promo. You should have X or Y ROAS because the ROAS is going to increase. Here's what we think a good estimate is for you. Go buy something in excess of that just in case. Unless they're running some sort of limited release and it's some special kit. No, we can talk about that later though.
For sure. So I think you touched on something that I want to talk about a little bit, because it's like, it's absolutely the case in my world, being a fractional CFO for e-com brands, like, is how important Q4 is, how important that holiday season is for my clients, and it being a determining factor of whether or not the whole year was a success, right? Can you talk me through a little bit about how important the Q4 holiday season is for your clients?
Yeah. Depending on the brand, it can be everything. Some people, it's like we've had Christmas ornament companies that it's like literally like their whole business. And so it kind of varies a little bit, but it is what you make of it as well. If you decide to start working on some special bundle offer in June that's very thematic to fall or Christmas, that's where a lot of effort, prep, organization, and planning that goes into the changes to the website, the social and video and imagery content that you end up producing, and tests that you run for how you're going to phrase it. That kind of thing can be a big job and very successful. I've seen it happen very, very successfully too. So it kind of is what you make it, unless you can't really participate because you've got retailers and you can't discount the same way. And then you've got to go with some sort of gift with purchase type of thing. And we can talk about that a little more later too. Was that a good answer?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you know what I see on my end? Well, here's what's interesting from kind of like a finance perspective, because in the finance world, when it comes to gearing up for Q4 and talk about like how important Q4 is as a season for the brands we work with, a lot of it is like forecasting, right? Like, how do we think about forecasting how big Q4 is going to be? And the important thing that I want to point out is that, like, this is a tip that I think a lot of brands will find helpful, is that you do need to be careful about what percentage of your total annual revenue Q4 is going to be this year if you're growing. Because when you're at a smaller, what I often see is when you're smaller and you're in the early stages of scaling, it's very common that Q4 could be 75% of your annual revenue, right?
Right.
But as you continue to scale and you start getting better at acquiring customers all throughout the year, Q4 is still huge, but it's no longer as massive as it was at the beginning as a percentage of annualized revenue. I've often seen it go from like 75% one year, and then maybe the next year it's 50, and then maybe the next year after that it's 45, and then maybe it settles in at about 40. And then even when you start talking about bigger scale, like you're starting to get into 9 figures of revenue, it can sometimes settle in at like, in the 30s. And so I guess the tip is to not, like, you should look at the percentage of annualized revenue that previous Q4s were, but you really need to tap into your marketing team to understand dollars, because dollars of revenue and dollars of spend are not the same thing as percentages. Percentages can trick you at scale. Do you have any like comments on that?
Yeah, for sure. Looking at the customers, the people that bought from you in Q4 and never bought again is a very different person that might be buying from you throughout the year. That might be a gifting person and they're looking for something that for somebody else. Having a good sense of just how many people just bought in Q4 and trying to look at what was spent at that time frame, what the revenue was attached to those specific people, and what's my budget this year. It might give you some sort of understanding of what you might be able to expect from completely net new buyers that are totally unrelated to your true repeat customers.
Yeah, that's a super solid call out. And like, to kind of extend what some of the things you touched on there a little bit, it's like when I think about looking at like percentage year over year growth in Q4, right? Or I look at percentage of revenue that Q4 is for the entire year, that's helpful to get like kind of like a very rough forecast. but leaning on being able to do something that's a little bit more like bottoms up, where you can actually look at like expected spends and ROAS, and even some of the other funnel metrics like conversion rates and how we expect those to change. You can kind of gut check those very high level top down revenue forecasts. I'm actually doing that with a brand right now where like you can kind of there's a couple ways. This is very back of the napkin, right? To forecast top line revenue from a tops down perspective. It's like, hey, last year each quarter had a certain percentage mix of total revenue for the year. I'm seeing a certain revenue pace actuals year to date. I'm going to extrapolate that across the same percentages of last year and see what I might be able to hit. That can be helpful like directionally, but is dangerous because those percentages change as you scale. But now we're going and looking at it from a bottoms up perspective, and we're going and we're looking at traffic, and we're looking at conversion rates, and we're looking at AOVs, and we're looking at that for the last several months, and then looking at how traffic and conversion rates and AOVs are expected to change in Q4, and using that to do a little bit more of an informed bottoms up revenue forecast as opposed to that very high level and kind of crude top down forecast.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, really good.
So what are some key areas that you recommend brands really focus on when they're looking at Q4 planning efforts? And like the big thing that I want to call out here is that I think I see a lot of brands, Q4 is prime time, right? You've got like 6 to 8 weeks to crush it. You know, everyone's in the buying mood. You want to make sure that you capitalize. There are so many different things you can do. And I see analysis paralysis, right? And like trying to boil the ocean. So what do you think people should focus on in terms of like looking at Q4 planning efforts? Where are the key areas that you recommend people focus?
Yeah. So one thing that at least a lot of people I talk to don't appreciate how important keeping evergreen content live is. Like most of the BFCM ads are just be like heavy promo.
Yeah.
Here's our discount. But we got to remember, most of the ads that are going live at that time are brand new ads. So they have no momentum and no history. And a lot of time when you get a banger that's going off, you usually just let it run throughout the whole time because it's got momentum and you don't want to touch it, So it's really important to keep some evergreen ads pumping so you have momentum. And those ads do a really good job of driving revenue because people realize those are selling, products that they like, not necessarily just that it's 70% off or something like that. So that's one thing for sure. Ads that introduce people to all the products that are available are really important. It doesn't just have to be about one product. We've seen people extend shipping times out through January or later, or extend return times too, like just making it more convenient for people. If they take some of their risk away of buying, if they buy the wrong product, do I have, you got a little extra time, relax, there's, we've talked to clients that have had extra people come on their customer service team just to field phone calls, inquiries about, hey, for the sizing on this, I'm buying it for the 7-year-old, granddaughter. Just want to make sure I get the right size. You're getting close to the shipping date. So a little bit of extra customer service there has been rather effective as well, just improving the experience and making sure they get the right product. I don't know. Those are some of the things that I was thinking.
So one thing I've been hearing a lot about with the brands that I'm working with, and in fact, I'm a big like content consumer. And so I was listening the other day to the Limited Supply podcast, which is all about scaling DTC. And they actually had a podcast episode about Q4 planning. And these guys were talking about like, they're just really big on bundling for Q4. And like, I actually have several clients who are working on their strategy, and they are all separately, unbeknownst to one another, working on their bundling strategy. And it's like a core part of the holiday kind of like plan. What kind of tips do you have in terms of like thinking through bundling?
I don't like any kind of buy more, get more type of promo.
Mhm.
That is not the recommendation. Like we've seen those kind of things and it's just way too complicated. I think bundling in general is fine. Just if I was going to answer that simply, I'd say just try to keep it as simple as possible. The simplicity, there's so many sales and promos going on. Every ad that comes up is heavy discount.
Yeah.
You've got to keep yours really simple. And if you overcomplicate this bundle, or if I buy this, I get the next level, it's like all that stuff can be really challenging. I'm sure there's somebody out there who's got a case study. It's like, oh no, we smashed with that. But like, it's been our experience that that's way too complicated. We needed people to click and get through and buy. And the
Got
simpler
it.
the
So,
process,
so to kind of clarify, I think I hear what you're saying is that like, it's not necessarily don't try to push a bundle, but it's like this bundle that includes these things, right? Like,
yeah,
and you're not like, hey, if you buy this much, your discount's 5%, but then if you go buy this much, it's 10%. And if you buy this, it's 15%.
right.
People have to think too much about that
Right.
and can't really see a direct line between like their purchase and the discount value that they're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have, again, going back to something I said earlier, like making it thematic, we've seen that kind of stuff work really, really well. And, if I buy some sort of product and it comes with a hat and a shirt and some sort of water bottle, like those are stocking stuffers maybe, or it's another chance to get this to be a really good present. If it's a gift, there's just a little bit more going into it. It's not necessarily going to be a bad thing. Because again, a lot of the people that are buying at this time might not really, they're looking for like, the right kind of sweatshirt for their emo granddaughter or something like that, like, so having a bundle, it's like, hey, this is all the right stuff, might be a really good option as well. So there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's like really simple. When it's like I've seen one
Totally
option
understand.
bundle, smoke it.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. One other thing, I'd love to get your your kind of advice on this, because as the CFO for a lot of these brands that are crafting their promotional strategy, and actually this was a challenge that we had at Guardian Bikes, the brand, the DTC brand that I was on the founding team of. Everyone wants to be perceived as more premium, right? And like there's a concern among founders that discounting is going to trash the brand or is going to devalue the perceived value of the products that they sell and the quality. I have a couple of kind of like hypotheses from a CFO perspective that I want to like offer and get your feedback on how you think about it from a marketing perspective. So
Yeah.
one is even Apple, a lot of people cite Apple as like this like premium brand that like doesn't discount. They even do Black Friday sales. And I think there's something, I'm not saying that you should necessarily become a brand that does discounts all the time, maybe every single holiday or every possible kind of like thematic event. But I think there's something about Black Friday, Cyber Monday that like that's American culture, is to get in and shop, and that you've got to do something to basically stand out in the crowd, or at least be going in the same direction as the rest of the pack, because everyone's spending ad dollars on providing some sort of a Black Friday, Cyber Monday deal. And in my mind, the concept of bundling, and not like create your own bundle or necessarily like tiered, but like, hey, like for example, at Guardian Bikes, all year long, we usually sell just a bike, but for Black Friday, we're selling a bike with knee pads, elbow pads, and a helmet, right? And you get X% off of that particular bundle. I believe that because it's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and that you're bundling things, it doesn't nearly impact the perceived value of like your flagship product, like the bike in our case, because you're giving them a discount for a bundle, right? And it's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and everyone's doing it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because it's a big question founders ask me all the time.
Yeah, I mean, as a performance agency, naturally, we're inclined to see you promote through discounts on Black Friday. It's like we want to see you participate, but sometimes you can't do that, because retail restrictions, and they just simply can't offer it. That's a challenge, or they have some sort of perceived value they don't want to interrupt. like maybe it depends on the product too. If it's sunglasses, like how many expensive sunglasses am I buying? But doing something like a 10% discount or something just to participate, even if you never do it, is definitely not a bad idea. If you're not really going to discount that much, which I advocate for discounting, especially at Black Friday, I think it's going to be okay because it's short term and you don't have to do it for 6 weeks at 40% off, like a lot of brands are doing here, right? You can just participate in Black Friday and throughout the month, watch your ROAS, watch the CPMs. And if the performance goes down, you can take the budget down and just manage your way through it. You don't have to fight against the storm with a 10% off promo or something like that. But if you are going to do that, really any promo, especially for your past purchasers, you want to make sure that they know when they're going to be able to get the best deal. And if you are going to promo, and this is your once a year discount opportunity, advising people of that, and when it expires is a good idea as well, because they're going to know, especially if they're in your email, they're going to, you respect the people that are part of that community a little bit more than those who aren't. And you advise them of when they're going to be able to get the best deal and when it expires and give them the opportunity to save a couple bucks. Even if it's, a gift with purchase or some sort of participatory effort for Black Friday that doesn't involve discounting.
There's something you said in there that I think is another topic we can riff on a little bit around this. Because this is something that comes up all the time and is in questions with e-com brands I work with. And I'm sure that you guys hear this all the time too, is that there are kind of two separate, I think, perspectives I see in-house at brands about emailing during this time. And one is like, hey, we don't want to be annoying and email too much. And then there's the ones that are like, we have to email a lot to stay top of mind all throughout the sale. I know at Guardian Bikes, when we were young and, early in the e-com game, we didn't understand this. And then we later on started talking with some, marketing professionals, and they're like, hey, listen, you have got to email a few times a day. You have to have your lead up emails, right? And it's more frequent than you think. And then on the day of the sale, you have to be multiple times a day emailing. Like, what are your thoughts in terms of like the volume of emails you should be sending on a big leading up to and during a big weekend like Black Friday, Cyber Monday?
So really about your segmentation. So an audience we talked about earlier was the people who bought from you last Q4 and have never bought since that whole year. That whole audience of people needs to be communicated with in a specific way and different than the people that are in your other segments. And you can use that as a lookalike too, and other ad channels and stuff. Like, very powerful list of people. But the way you communicate to them and how often you email them is probably a lot different than people that are in your welcome series and non-purchasers. And so while it's important, I think, to email a lot, I wouldn't advocate necessarily you have to email twice a day, especially because some people might have agencies and they charge more for every email. It takes time to design and send out. So I don't know if I'd advocate necessarily for 2 emails a day, but certainly as you're throughout the whole month, certainly not. But a daily email, especially the week of and every other, the day before, the month before and week after, is probably pretty appropriate. There are going to be a lot of emails that get sent out though. So if you have the budget for it to send 2 a day, it's not necessarily a terrible idea. It just has to align with your goals, and you don't want to burn your list. So make sure it's segmented. But I would, maybe
good call. The segmenting thing is super important, especially if you can, especially at the very least, like by purchasing behavior, in terms of like understanding whether you're trying to get someone who's on your list who've never bought before or someone to buy again, as well as like if there's any other kind of attribute you can segment by and make the messaging a little bit more personalized to try to get them to open it and hopefully convert. So I want to talk a little bit more about, I want to switch our focus to talking specifically about ad spend planning. So like the impetus of this original, of this topic, it's something I've been talking about a lot recently with prospects and existing clients. So when you're dealing with growing and you're talking like really big growth goals for Q4, I think one thing that is hard for brands to wrap their mind around is that, like, to hit their big aggressive sales goals, considering the ROAS that they're probably going to see, how much they actually have to spend in ad spend to hit those goals. And so here's kind of like how I want to tee this up is, like, I've seen in the past, I have this one brand I'm working with that they want to do 20 million in revenue in November and December.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 200% growth, or actually it's more like 300% growth year over year. They've been seeing that all throughout the year in lower seasonal sales months. But when I looked at that, I was like, hey, look, at a 4 ROAS, you got to spend $5 million, right? And it really a 4 MER, but like you got to spend $5 million, and there's not that much time to spend $5 million, right? It's a short, compressed timeline. And so we have to have a plan leading up to this, because we can't just go from, $10,000 a day to $150,000 a day. Our performance is going to get totally decimated. So we got to have a plan, and we got to get out ahead of it. What tips and tricks do you have for ad spend planning leading up to the holidays to be able to hit your goals?
Yeah, we would advocate for an overall budget, not a performance related budget. If things are spectacular, maybe you talk and crank the budgets up more, but you need to look at a top end, and set thresholds for performance. And this is the overall budget. If the depends on how long the sale is. If we're talking about a 6-week sale now that starts mid-October, like a lot of people are talking about, that's different. The way you handle the budgets. When the sale goes live, there's going to be a big peak, and you're going to spend a lot more that first day, especially the second day too. And then it's going to kind of come back to a normal, realistic baseline of how it's going to perform. Because if you're in early sale out of nowhere, people don't know if they're going to get a sale again or something like that. And there's a few weeks of slower time, and then you hit it really hard Black Friday and Cyber Monday. A couple points on that, and I'll address the scaling issue as well. Every year, there's always a good day. Last year, it was Black Friday. The year before, it was Cyber Monday. No idea what it's going to be, but the recommendation for sure is when you see the success, don't wait to see if it's going to get better for Cyber Monday. If it's on Black Friday, push and hit the numbers you can hit within the overall budget guidelines. Because you never know if it's going to be worse. Like last year, again, Cyber Monday was a lot worse than Black Friday. So the year before it was Cyber Monday, and we had learned really clearly that you just have to go with the flow. When people are buying, let's go for it. So we recommend pushing on those days. And if it means scaling from 10K to 150K, we've done bigger numbers than that too, very successfully. You just have to know what the performance thresholds are you need to hit. And if you're hitting them, then you push and not necessarily wait. But, also you can't just spend if the numbers aren't there either. Mm-hmm. So you want to participate, but not throw money away. That's why it's good to have, metrics that you need to hit. I don't know. Was that a good answer?
Yeah. No, great answer. And like to build on that, one thing I hear a lot is, and this is for brands that are, usually in my experience, they're more like in the 8-figure world, like 10+ million in annualized revenue, and even honestly probably like tens of millions. There's this strategy out there of like, or there's this school of thought to spend heavier than you normally would at a lower MER or ROAS, at the end of October and into the beginning of November, even though people aren't converting. But if you have the right, like mid-funnel metrics that you're seeing and the right engagement on the page and things like that they're willing to scale to have those people in their funnel. And then they've kind of already gotten that awareness. They didn't have to capture that awareness when everyone else is scaling spend during Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And they have some sort of a retargeting and email flow strategy. They're also scaling spend on the big weekend, but they're kind of doing like a acquisition strategy or an awareness strategy several weeks ahead of time. The MER is not nearly as good. So you got to have the cash flow to float it. But do you have any thoughts or seen that be successful or not successful?
Yeah. September, October are very important months to be spending. And usually October, depending on the brand, is going to perform pretty poorly because people are waiting to get their wallet and credit card out for November. So, but without the momentum, it's really can be very challenging the next month in November when everybody is cranking up their budgets. specifically though, about your question regarding, really discounting just to get people in the funnel.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Fabletics, I mean, a lot of brands really do that heavy, and they look at CAC reduction as their primary KPI throughout Black Friday and Cyber Monday in an effort to grow their list and look at the LTV to CAC ratio. So but that just won't work for some brands. If you sell a baby stroller, I'm buying one of those every 2 years, and the next one I'm buying is a 2-seater, not a 1-seater. And it's going to be 3 years later when I have my next kid, So that strategy just won't work. But for a brand where people are coming back 3 to 4 times a year, absolutely. I would get people in, heavy reduction on CAC, but only if I've got really good email communication. And it can't be just sale, promo, product release information on emails. It's got to be super legitimate, interesting, value-based emails that keep people engaged and captivated so they come back. And that is a model for sure. And there's tools to do that. We have, I would recommend picking 10 products that either you're sunsetting or aren't necessarily hero products, and discount them at 70%, something insane. And then say 70% off and, site-wide type of language and a site-wide sale, but the 70% doesn't necessarily impact everything on the site. So it gives you an opportunity to have kind of like a loss leader, but then bring people to the site to buy things that are only 25 or 30% off, increase the basket size and things like that. So there's ways to get people in, enticing them with a big promo, but not necessarily forcing them to or not necessarily giving them only the option to buy at a heavy discount too.
Yeah. I love that. Those are like a bunch of super solid tips.
I want to, if I could ask, one of the big problems going into this though is cash flow planning, forecasting. It'd be nice to hear a little bit from your perspective as a CFO, how are you planning the cash flow conversation, the inventory conversations? I would imagine you're literally doing it right now, because some people might be on a 20 weeks. If you could talk about some of the planning for cash flow and inventory and how you go about guiding that would be really great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the simplest level, you got to have a 3-statement financial model, which means projecting P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow statement, so that you can project not just the P&L impact of your decisions, but more importantly, the balance sheet and cash flow impact. Because the reality is, when you're gearing up for a big seasonal spike in sales like we do in Q4, you have to buy all the inventory before it actually gets liquidated and turns into cash. So you've got to have the capital to invest in that and hold it before the sales come, right? And so a couple, in addition to having a 3-statement financial model, which is something that we obviously build for all of our clients, it's the first tool we build with everyone that we work with. There's a couple of kind of tactical things we do with the tool. One is confirming that we calculate how much inventory needs to be purchased to hit our most aggressive sales goal expectations. And then we assume we're going to buy all of that, and we're going to hit a worst case sales scenario. And if we still have enough cash, then there's probably if we feel really confident that we're at least going to hit that worst case sales scenario, and we have plenty of capital to float. And basically what you can do is you miss your goals by a mile, but you just don't purchase more, and you right size your inventory in Q1, possibly Q2, and wait to repurchase. So if we run a worst case sales scenario against purchasing the most aggressive inventory we could possibly purchase, then that to me tells me hey, we can go ahead and do this. Brands that can typically do that have really solid cash buffers, or they have really high gross margins. Because if your gross margin, if your inventory only costs you, a couple of brands I work with, their cost of goods sold is 15% of their revenue. Oh, wow. So your gross margin super high, you can stock up on inventory because it's so cheap it's so cheap for every unit to buy, right? Mm-hmm. Contrast that with Guardian bikes, where we had solid margins, but it costs, instead of $6 a unit to buy, it costs us, hundreds of dollars to buy a bike. And so every bike we're overstocked on, that's a lot of capital that's tied up, right? So again, 3-statement financial model, forecast worst case sales scenario against the most aggressive inventory purchase scenario, and see if you can survive. What I often see is there's a gap. And so that's when we talk about making sure we have the right debt facility in place, because what having the right debt facility can do is basically spread out the debt facility can pay your vendor when they need to be paid, but you can pay back the debt facility in Q1 and Q2 and possibly even beyond, depending on how well you structure it, in the event that you miss your sales goals by a mile. And I would say the other just very general kind of advice is just start communicating really early, like communicating with your marketing agency, communicating with your suppliers, communicating with your 3PL, getting your marketing team and your finance team and your supply chain team all internally communicating and communicating early. Because like the end of the day, there's a lot of science behind running forecasts, but rule number one of forecasting is it's going to be wrong, right? And what will actually save the day when your forecast is wrong is being able to run scenarios in your 3-statement financial model and having a team that cross-functionally is communicating frequently so that we can adjust along the way.
Yeah. I would add, if I could add something to your previous message about inventory ordering, I would say my perspective would be to not have new product releases as a component of that. Like, you got to eliminate those from the decision-making process, because sometimes they flop. Like that, I would probably say to run that on hero products that actively are going to convert, or you have a high level of prediction that it's going to convert. It's not necessarily the best time to launch new products, because new customers aren't really going to appreciate the fact that it's a new product the same way as they are a discounted product that they think is a good value. I don't know if you agree with that, but that would be my narrative there.
That's a really, really good call. That's actually not something that I've thought of, but it makes a lot of sense. I would say to kind of generalize what you're saying is like kind of a concept that I would recommend as a general tip is like, don't mess with your mix, your marketing mix, your product mix. Like, don't mess with your system too much going into Q4. Double down on what's working already, right? If you try to mess with it too much, it's too. So we did that early at Guardian. We tried to, switch out marketing agencies, bring in new products, try new messaging, try opening up a new digital ad channel, and Q4 being kind of like the launch of that. And there were several flops because we just didn't have the time to prove it out. And then so we went and scaled something that wasn't proven, and it was too little too late when we realized, like, dude, we got to cut this off because we just wasted a lot of money. And so that's why, I mean, some of you brand founders out there may already know this, but things like doing a code freeze on your site, like always at the end of October, like last day of October. And sometimes we'd even do it into like mid-October, even beginning of October. Code freeze. You don't mess with your site. You lock it down. Don't be expanding into new ad channels, new products. Like, I'm sure there are some exceptions out there, so keep that in mind. But as a general rule, you want to scale what's already working in Q4. You don't want to figure out that something doesn't work at scale, because that can cost a lot of money.
Yep. I would say I could give some recommendations too on promos and stuff too, like to that end. Our site-wide sale for sure. I think I mentioned that site-wide sale for everything. And then as you approach Black Friday, Cyber Monday that week, you really want to remove the email capture through the pop-up and just change that to a click to copy for the promo code. And then you need to make sure you change the banner on the homepage. Sale ads go to the homepage very typically. I mean, unless there's a specific product you're trying to sell, you definitely want to make sure that the banner on the homepage above the fold has promo language on it, because that's where sale ads are typically going. You're getting, rather than using the product to get people to the site, you're using the promo to get people to the site, and then they go explore what they find that's interesting. So I would say definitely have the code auto apply site-wide, a banner on site-wide. Those are, at least a couple of changes I would definitely make. Remove that email capture like week of. So, because you just want to eliminate all the barriers to purchase. Yeah. It's great to capture the email addresses, but we need to get people's credit card out of their wallet as fast as possible at that point.
Yeah, that is, that's interesting. I think another thing that I wanted to kind of ask you about is like, how do you think about you've actually touched on this a little bit in some of your other answers, but like, what are some of the do's and don'ts with omni-channel promotional strategies? Like whether let's even just take retailers, like if you got some B2B wholesale, let's take that out of the equation. Let's just talk about, you've got an Amazon, a lot of brands we work with got their D2C site and they've got an Amazon seller central site, right? Like, what are some do's and don'ts to think about when you're doing a promotion Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and thinking about it from an omni-channel perspective?
So evaluating the performance across everything. So your true marketing efficiency ratio, right? Like Amazon revenue, site revenue, total lift, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just, I think some of the things that come to mind are what you're talking about. Like, how do you assess performance? The other thing is like, how do we think about what promotion is showing in each channel? Like, what are some just the tips and tricks?
Yeah, I would say too that what promos are showing in each channel. I mean, trying to look at actual retargeting ads and not just trusting that things are set up well is really important. I think the type of videos that you make where we're displaying many of the products that people could buy as well as the discounts is really important across all channels. We've had people remove Amazon buttons from the site and we've had people keep them on. Both have been effective, surprisingly, but price parity is really important. If the price post shipping on site is $10 more than the price on Amazon with Prime shipping, it's pretty unlikely that people are going to buy at least twice on site. So trying to have some price parity across those two is really important. And then in general, trying to figure out with tools like Triple Whale and North Beam, try to evaluate where buyers are coming from and what channels, and then chase those that are the stallions. And looking at the overall lift on Amazon based on how much you're spending across all paid is kind of traditional way of looking at it, I would say.
Totally. I have a brand that's spending a ton on Meta, and if you allocate all the Meta spend to just their website, their Shopify store, it looks like their MER is like sub 2. But then you go over to Amazon and Amazon's getting an MER of 6 or 7. And there's undoubtedly channel. So like, we look at both because you want to understand directional implications of what we do in each advertising channel. But we also look at blended. And if there's an overall lift in the blended MER, then it's like, okay, well, overall, this is hitting the bottom line and ultimately hitting our contribution margin. It's improving contribution margin, even though it looks like our D2C site is performing horrendously, but Amazon's making up the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to create awareness somewhere. And if that's on YouTube Shorts, if it's on TikTok or Facebook, all those channels are going to drive conversions too. But when you're in the bottom of the funnel making a decision, all the work that's been done to create fascination and awareness and interest in the specific product and making it memorable, you reap the rewards of that at the bottom of the funnel because you stand out in the list of product silhouettes that are very lifeless. So it's the combination you have to look at. And paid media is a water faucet. Turn the water off and the sales stop coming. So
for sure,
there's a direct impact. And Amazon's bottom up, right? There's a lot of brand involved there, and paid social and search, that's kind of top down. So you're creating the awareness and then fostering it, pushing people down the funnel. So what about you? What are the holiday planning implications or thoughts from the finance perspective?
So besides like the cash flow planning and forecasting stuff, there's a couple of like, just, I guess, points of wisdom. I don't know, people can probably see the gray hairs I've got here from the 3 little kids and the I've been through too many Black Friday, Cyber Mondays in the e-com world. And but like, there's some things that I just was naive to early on that I wanted to like share with everyone, because I think those are the kind of like, battle scars that can make us stronger and more wise on future Black Fridays. And one of them is like, it's okay to run out of inventory. I know that I talked about this like scenario of projecting your most aggressive sales goals and can we afford it even if we hit the worst possible sales scenario. that is a good thing to do to do a what if and understand the boundaries of risk. But I've been through so many Black Fridays where on the purchasing side, we had this fear inside of us that like, what if we leave money on the table, right? And I've had holidays where we ran out and we under ordered, and then I've had holidays where we just ordered way too much and we were just bound to a line of credit, right? And we were not smart about how we crafted the line of credit. We survived. We lived to fight another day. But looking back, brands always ask me like, hey, John, how much inventory should I buy? I go, hey, listen, it's okay to run out. Like we should buy as much as we can, but in my opinion, after doing this for many years, I think it's better to run out. If you had to choose one, it's better to run out than be overstocked, unless you have an abundance of capital available, which some brands do, but in this environment, most brands don't. And so, order as aggressively as you can, lean on your CFO and your financial model to understand like the biggest risk adjusted bet you can place. But hey, if you run out of inventory, you crushed it. Not every brand is running out of inventory, and be proud of that and learn from it and figure out if you can do better next Black Friday. And I would say the other kind of piece of wisdom is like,
I could address that actually too, if you don't mind.
100%.
That is definitely where you have to, as a brand owner, pick your perspective, because the media buyers are definitely going to be on the opposite side of that coin. All that matters to us is the momentum. And last year we sold out 3 of our biggest clients. We sold them out. I mean, it was like impossible to sell these guys out. And we sold all of them out of product in early December. And it was like all the ads had to get, there was heavy communication. I mean, it was like they were happy to sell out and everything, but it was like, man, rebuilding the ads took months to get them back to perform the way that we really wanted them to perform. They get back and you get peaks in there and stuff, but like the momentum component is a tough thing to quantify probably.
Yeah.
In that decision-making process, but it's being a brand owner is tough because your marketing partner is going to tell you, we really don't want to run out. Your CFO is saying it's better to run out than not. And as the leader, you've got to try and figure out what your tolerance is for pain, because there's going to be one way.
Well, I love that. When a couple tips that I've learned like have come out of dealing with that balancing act. One is like, even if you have long lead times, can you place the most aggressive order that you feel comfortable with and have your factory on alert for a couple smaller orders? And if you have to air freight them, it still may be profitable if the alternative was completely running out, right? And so like some brands that are like really worried, I'm like, hey, look, let's place the single big order that's as aggressive as we feel comfortable with, and then let's stage some smaller orders that we can expedite if we need to, but we don't expedite them if we're not crushing it, right? Or if we're not going to end up needing them before the holiday. So that's a way to like kind of split the difference.
Yeah. I would add on to that too, to not pre-sell. I've seen, if you're out of inventory, just be out of inventory, man, because I have seen nightmare situations where we're going to ship this stuff out in 2 weeks and freight gets delayed, or there's product manufacturing defect and they have to send it all back. Then you got people up in arms in your emails talking about how they didn't get their product and I was supposed to have it. Nightmare. So
I've been through that many times as well. And it becomes this interdependent web between supply, marketing, and customer service. And like marketing figuring out like, can we turn these ads back on? Can we not? And then customer service is like, is that stuff going to arrive? We told everyone it was. We've been wrong twice. It is a huge mess, and I've been through it too. And I think that's a fantastic tip. And I think the other thing,
your recommendation is unbelievable, though. Like to tell your manufacturer to be ready for some smaller orders. That is a great tip, man.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, if you know your contribution margins, which your CFO should be able to help you, it's possible. It depends on the product category, but it's possible you can air freight something. And because your incremental decision is against running out and making $0, you may still be able to take a smaller profit and it still adds to your bottom line, even though you're taking a smaller margin. You got to understand your contribution margin to make that decision, but it is something you can do. And I think the only other like kind of wisdom point I'll make, and then we'll turn to the last 10 minutes to answer any questions that are out there. is to prepare for higher logistics costs. I didn't know this early on. Inbound and outbound spot rates go up, and then especially outbound, FedEx, UPS, every year they introduce their peak surcharges. So like the highest volume of the year that you're shipping, your shipping costs go up. And so you got to make sure that you factor that into your projections so that you know your contribution margins, and you can give your marketing team like really solid targets that factor in the fact that your costs are going to go up a bit during that peak season.
What kind of increase are we talking about? I mean, is it even possible to give a rough estimate? Are we talking about like a 50% increase, a 10%?
No, it's not usually 50%. And certainly there are some nuances with, it can be more accentuated for big products that get tagged with like weight surcharges and dimensional surcharges.
Sure.
But for like, we'll call like the average package size, it's maybe, oftentimes around 10%, could be 15 or 20, but usually there's still plenty of room in your margin, but you need to be able to estimate that so that you actually know what your contribution margin is expected to be for the holiday season, because it will be likely different than the rest of the year.
Right.
Any other like brief wisdom that you want to provide, Bobby, before I see we have one question in the comments. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to throw them in the comments and we'll answer them right now. But anything else you got on your end with holiday Q4 wisdom?
I don't know. I think I've given it all, man.
Yeah, no, we've had some really, really solid stuff that we've talked about here. And, I wish I had something like this going into the Q4s that I've done in the past. And so let's see here. We've got a question here. What is your read on inventory levels, specifically oversupply across the CPG industry, and how that might impact Q4 pricing? I've noticed some pretty aggressive end of summer sales over the last few weeks. I guess I can start on my end, and being that like I probably have a direct read on this, but I'm sure in the marketing world, there's at least like an indirect sense of this. So I would say that across the brands that I currently work with, I would say that a lot of them are, I'd say the majority of them are in either middle of the road or slightly overstocked inventory positions right now. In terms of like how this might, no one is like egregiously overstocked, and no one's overstocked that I'm seeing with a good that is like going to become obsolete or go out of style or is perishable or anything like that. So, there may be some impact to Q4 pricing for a couple of them, a small handful of them that just want to capitalize on the demand, and they're discontinuing some SKUs and they just want to turn it into cash and replenish with their kind of hero SKUs. But most that I'm working with right now, even if they are in somewhat overstocked positions, they are generally trying to just go at Q4 with their typical discount. They're not doing anything in excess of their typical discount because they have an excess inventory position. Do you have any read on how your clients are doing, Bobby, in terms of like inventory positions and if they're trying to move overstock at all? Oh, you're on mute right now. Should have brought I have a coffee mug that says, dude, you're muted. I should have brought it.
We have clients that are seasonal and, like apparel. They're always trying to get rid of their stuff, summer sale, because fall's coming. We're talking about sweatshirts. We're not talking about tank tops. Same thing with like candles or something like that. Like people start buying the fall scents rather than the summer scents. And so I haven't seen anything that's atypical of our normal seasonal changes for new products coming in, because people are, typically ordering new products. But for non-seasonal products, I haven't seen anything too crazy for end of summer sales. Most everything I've seen is just very traditional planning for Q4.
For sure. And we may have a biased sample at Free to Grow CFO because we specifically work with growing brands. And so growing brands may not be dealing with the same thing that ones that are, maybe a little stagnant or are. So, but yeah, that's what we're seeing. Anyone else have any questions that they want to throw in the comments? I'll give another minute or so.
I will address the first part of that question too. I mean, to me, it really feels like this is going to be an enormous Q4. It's been a rather tumultuous year for a lot of different brands. And, with a lot of liquidity seeming to dry up, I think a lot of people are planning to push really, really hard this Q4. So I would anticipate it being extremely competitive, and brands looking to make up a lot of sales at the end of the year here. It could be the biggest Q4 we've seen in years and years.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, looking at the macro picture, I'm doing a lot of reading about it, and obviously we've got kind of some data across the clients that we work with. It's very, I could easily see that happening. I mean, it depends. You can go anywhere and find, content about the fact that there's a huge economic storm coming, and you can also find content that is saying the exact opposite. It is quite confusing. There are a lot of like leading economic indicators that are generally signaling, a slowdown in the economy generally, but in terms of exactly how it'll impact Q4 is not super clear. The consumer could still potentially be really strong in Q4 of this year, despite some of those leading indicator changes.
I suspect a lot of that fear and tightening in discretionary spending is going to impact the sales in a big way. People are going to be looking for promos. This is their time. They're going to buy. People historically buy for themselves at Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I think we could see big numbers where people would start also buying for other people as well. Gifting is always a part of it, but you see a little more of that in early December too. This could be an enormous time where people open up their pockets and decide this is my chance to buy. I think it's really going to be a pretty incredible Q4.
That's huge. Those are actually really, really great points. I love that. So really quick, anyone else, any questions to drop in the comments? If not, we will go ahead and get closed up here. So first off, thanks everyone for joining. Really fast, Bobby. If you want to tell us just briefly about ATTN Agency and where people can find you.
We're a paid media agency, email, creative. If you're a direct-to-consumer brand, you can reach out to us to try and improve your efficiencies on ROAS or scale. We work with mid-market brands that are somewhere between 5 million and 100 million in sales. That's our real sweet spot. So if you're in that market and looking to sell online, not Amazon, anything like that, we're really just D2C on site. So feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to help you out.
Awesome. And over here at Free to Grow CFO, we're a CFO specifically for growing e-commerce brands. We're here to help you scale your business alongside healthy profit, cash flow, and confidence. And you can find us at our website, freetogrowcfo.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, obviously. And, if you want more tips like this, we write a weekly newsletter jam-packed full of tips just like this. I recommend going to our website and signing up for it, because you'll get actionable tips every Tuesday delivered to your email inbox. So thanks for joining, everyone. I hope this was helpful and hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, it'd be great. See you guys.